is what does good performance management look like in a hybrid world? And you know what, I mean, I've been looking at this topic for an ongoing basis throughout the pandemic, and I am a people manager and an HR person by background as well. And I've experienced lots of different challenges going through this. So my background, I've been in corporate learning and development roles, and I've been a line manager. So I've done jobs that many of you guys are doing as well. For those of you, this is your first. I'm very much into organisational development and change. So that's me, those are my contact details. Again, for those of you who are new to Actus, Actus, we offer a complete performance, talent and learning management suite. So it is about embedding meaningful year-round conversations. We have a number of modules so we can grow and scale with an organisation. And we also offer a host of value-added training and consultancy. And I guess this is just an insight into the sort of stuff that we try to do, thought leadership, we try to think fresh. So the learning outcomes from this particular session is we're going to look at what does good performance management look like in this hybrid world. Think about what systems and processes that we can use to set up for success. And they're not necessarily the same as they've always been. Or I suppose we can ask ourselves, are they the same as they've always been? It's just that we haven't been great at embedding them. To think about how can we motivate managers to engage people and to actually carry out the right practices in this hybrid setting, and how can we ensure that people are performing in this hybrid world where people are starting to feel a little bit of fatigue, being a bit challenged, where the line managers may feel exhausted in terms of being consistent, having to flex new muscles in terms of managing people in different places. So those are the sort of things that we're looking to understand and discuss. So just to get us started, tell me in the chat yourselves, what sort of issues are you finding with performance management? I'm talking about overall people performance management, not just sort of appraisal or underperformance. I'm talking about just getting people to perform, feel engaged and be developed. So what issues have you found? And I'm interested also if you feel that they've evolved over the past 2 years, because I believe they have. And that's kind of the premise that I'm going to drill into here when we're having this discussion. So while I wait for the chat to catch up, so do tell me what you think your challenges are. I'm actually going to put a poll up, which is where I've pre-thought, if you like, some of the challenges that I'm aware of that people have mentioned previously. So let me just put this up. So this is obviously not going to be exhaustive, which is why I'm encouraging you to put it in the chat as well. So you can choose more than one of these options, but I'm saying the sort of things I'm hearing people saying that they're struggling with is people can't see whether people are performing or not, lack of visibility of performance. Now, sometimes that's caused by poor or lack of goals, or the goals are not output enough, they're too vague what we're measuring people against. Is it that you don't think your managers have got the skills, confidence, and maybe motivation to continue to manage people in this hybrid motivated way? Do you think people are starting to get disengaged from the organisation? That sense of belonging has detached, so there's less ownership in terms of taking things on. People are a bit worn out. Fatigue, well-being, isolation. Again, this sort of jaundice. People are starting to go, actually, I do want to go back. I heard last week, I think someone was saying that more people say they do want to go back to the office now than they did a year ago, when people were loving the novelty maybe of homework or remote working. And at the start of the pandemic, I think managers and people were talking to each other much more frequently. Is it that maybe everyone's kind of gone into the old way of operating, which actually means people are talking less? So those are 6 things that I believe are possibly indicators. Interested for you to have a choice, but all of you have answered. Wow, 100%. So let's share that poll out for you. So I'll start the poll and I will share the results. You're saying, but actually quite a lot of them you've chosen. Let me just scan down the chat and see what you're saying. So hard to measure when you're not physically there. How to measure performance when not physically in the office. It's interesting that, Rachel, isn't it? Because I mean, wouldn't you argue that you're not really measuring performance when people are physically in the office, are you? Is it not that managers don't know how to set goals? That would be the, I suppose, the challenge that I say back, because just because you see people in the office doesn't mean that you're performing, does it? But I know that is what people feel. Engagement is definitely, employee engagement is one of the top searches now for people going out there. I think it went off as a topic and now it's higher. I think engagement is about belonging and people feeling included, and that sense where people are starting to detach from the organisation. I believe that will be linking to loss of staff, this whole concept of great resignation, loyalty dropping off because people don't feel that sense of belonging, or they certainly don't if their managers' interactions with them or their connections with the organisation have dropped off. Motivation, lack of accountability, peaks and troughs. That's true, isn't it, Joanne? Actually, just peaks and troughs. It's that kind of flow of morale and engagement. Fewer conversations to pick things up. I think that's something where people are not together. Maybe issues are not seen, Lisa, are they? They're not spotted as quickly. So we're having fewer conversations to resolve issues, and maybe don't see things so quickly. Less yes, Carol, less informal conversations regarding performance, and then things blow out of proportion potentially. They don't get nipped in the bud. And I think that's like an issue. Everything has to be scheduled, and you can't just have a quiet word with somebody while you're sort of having a coffee or give some people feedback. You've almost got to book it in. Yes, Ian. So they're talking hybrid working, but they kind of see you in the office. But again, will that actually make us better? Question it, definitely. Hard to train and upskill. It's mentality. So Rachel, you're responding to this. It's only, you can only measure performance if you can see the person well. Yes, so it's just a mentality that's got to change. And actually, even after 2 years. So just because you can see the person doesn't mean you're measuring their performance, does it? Totally agree. Lack of knowledge, skills and interest for managers to engage with performance management. Yes, so there. So please, Boldock, person who just said that you can change your name if you just click on your name in the participants list. If you right click, you should be able to change your name, because I am assuming your name isn't Boldock. But I totally agree, and I think that's one of the angles that that we're going to go down. So we're on the same page, and it looks like these are not a million miles off in terms of the challenges that we've got here. So what we need to be really clear about is, when we think about performance management, is that people management and in fact performance management, which is a bit of an unfortunate term because many people perceive it to be pejorative, they are different things, right? So an appraisal, that is just part of the people and performance management process, and all the things that go in between it, and it should really be a culmination, shouldn't it? We've talked about those things in the past. There's lots of I've done lots of webinars on that, and there's links we'll send to previous webinars I've talked about that. But what I wanted to share with you is some reflections that have struck me recently with the organisations that I've been working with. And again, please feel free to put in the chat if you agree or disagree with my thinking, because this is just my thinking. So right now, I believe that people and performance management looks a bit like this. It's kind of a bit in a balance, and it depends on the style of the manager. So I believe that pre-pandemic, we were able to get away with a mainly task focus. And someone actually put that in here. It's very close to that in one of the chat comments, where it was in terms of where we are. So I think we were much more about achievement. It was about financial targets. There's a person who put financial targets in there. Achievement, challenge, potentially inspiration, focusing on the goals, but it was all about the task. And when we were in a predominantly office environment, I guess the people stuff was able to just happen socially. It didn't happen through managers. You had that interaction. So it was okay to just drive, or reasonably okay to just drive hard on the task. And then in the pandemic, if you think about it, certainly I felt that we really had to switch. All the things I talked about how to manage in a pandemic, good managers were switching to focus on the person first. I mean, to be honest, good managers would always have balanced these two things. But the reality is, in many parts, certainly in the UK, management skill is quite low. So relatively low investment in it. And I'm sure lots of managers need to develop skills. So during the pandemic, I think it was more about working out what motivates the individuals in your team individually. It wasn't about the leader or the manager just being themselves and go, let's run for the goals. It was very much, the best people would be identifying, actually, I know that this person needs me to talk to them a few times a week. They really need building up. They need some support. They need to be able to talk things through. This other person actually will be okay most of the time, but they need to join the socials. This person needs to be brought out of the shell. They can't let them go too quiet because they can become isolated. So you had to really adapt your style more than before and schedule a meeting, a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or whatever, to kind of get in and have those conversations. We had to move from some cultures where people, if you were lucky, were having a one-to-one monthly, to actually having one-to-ones and team meetings weekly. Some were even doing daily. So this kind of frequency really stepped up at the start of the pandemic, if you remember, and it was the right thing to do. But then it probably wasn't sustainable. And over time, people have normed. So that we've normed and started to become less likely to talk to people. And then I think as time has gone on, we've maybe gone back into old styles or old frequencies of talking with people, and people are starting to get isolated, not feeling included. And it's sort of, I guess, a less adaptable style of management. So pre-pandemic, I felt, we were able to get away with just being all about the task, because you're in an office and you saw people and you pick things up, and it was kind of a directional way. During the pandemic, more people realized we have to think about well-being and belonging to people, empathy for people who are struggling with health issues or isolation and are concerned about people with COVID. But now I think we need something different altogether. And the businesses that are trying to just flip back, or managers are trying to flip back to the old way of being, are going to miss something. It's not the right thing to do. I believe that what we need to do is bring them both together. And we need to have this both task and people focused. Now, again, arguably, this would always have been the right thing to do. But the challenge is we are looking for, if you think about people's personalities, I think about everybody here. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to almost rate your organisation as to where you are in relation to these two. If you think about yourselves, you probably have a greater natural likelihood to be development focused or more sort of task and directive. Not everybody finds it easy to do all of these. And the reality is those managers that were in place pre-pandemic and perhaps were very task and directional and gung-ho focused, they may well not have had those people skills anyway, because it's just not their natural style and may not be motivated to do them. So we might have risk in our organisation if people aren't willing. I mean, fundamentally, I think the question we need to think is, if we are going to have this more enhanced approach, which is engaging, but also getting people to perform, because that's the key. We need to engage and retain people, and we need to deliver results. People need, we need to sell out of this COVID period. How do we do it? And how do we, as people who are in HR, influence this? So the question is, are our managers and processors up to it? And that's the question I suppose I would ask us. Do you have managers who have the skills, and do you have the processes that are going to drive or you hang those skills around? Have you got those in place? So what systems and behaviours do you want to have, in my opinion? Well, if we haven't got there, if we didn't have them before, so back to the lady who was saying, no, people want to get them back in the office because then it'll be easy to get people to perform, know if they're performing or not. Well, they are deluding themselves, in my opinion, because you're still not going to know if they're performing. You just know if they're in the office. And so we need to make sure that if they haven't learned during the pandemic, that people have clear goals or targets that can be broken down with milestones and deliverables. Now, the reality is, behavioural science has said forever that is one of the highest, if you want to increase performance, that's one of the most effective ways of increasing performance, as long as you balance it with feedback, which is interesting because that's on the people focus. So it's always been the case that goals and feedback are things that actually drive high performance. But we need to make sure, do people really understand what their jobs are? Have their jobs changed over the pandemic? I mean, I think job descriptions, I guess that's a bit of an outdated, old-fashioned approach term, but I suppose they need to have role clarity is what I'm trying to say. People need to know what's expected of them in terms of their day job, with goals and targets with stretch. People need to know how they align, how their role and their goals contribute to the overall business strategy. But the reality is, they actually need to care about the overall business strategy. So you need to make sure that they've been nurtured and they've got that sense of belonging to want to add value to it. So if they've been completely detached from the organisation, or they're still remote and their managers just leaves them to it and they don't feel any sense of belonging, they're not going to care whether they're aligned with the strategy or not. They're basically going to do as much as they have to do, possibly. Worst case scenario, they're going to start doing the bare minimum, or even sort of avoiding things and doing less than they should do. You do need to make sure you've got the right people with the right skills and the right roles. And again, thinking, have roles changed? Are we developing people? We need to encourage accountability and people to want to buy into accountability. So you can't really hold people accountable unless they have something to be accountable for. So that all goes back to clarity, goals and job descriptions, and people buying into them as adults, as opposed to having them just dumped on them. And you probably want to think about aligned reward and or consequence. So, you know, if people are achieving, are we rewarding them in line with that? And if they're not achieving, is something happening? Are managers picking up on it? Are they nipping performance issues in the bud? Are they, you know, being clear and having those conversations when something's going awry, so that ideally they're turned around? So all of those, I mean, nothing there is rocket science, but we need to have those things if we want to perform in place. But we also need to maintain this people focus, because there's this big engagement issue where people are potentially, they're coming from a point where the habit isn't being part of the office. Their habit isn't chatting with their mates around over the desk or around the water cooler. So those habits have changed. People's allegiance is quite possibly more to their home office. And if their manager hasn't kept them connected, then their loyalty and wish to work hard may well have depleted. On top of that, we know they might be more exhausted, a bit more worn down, a bit more Groundhog Day, the monotony, all those sort of things there. And we need to have this regular recognition and feedback. So are we catching people doing things right? Really, are the managers going out of their way to be people oriented, to help that person feel valued? And it's kind of a seller's market, isn't it, at the moment? So people can choose not to be there. So therefore, as the manager, they need to be really advocating building that relationship. It's not enough just to be hierarchical. They've got to be building that warmth and relationship and that loyalty. And this, not everyone's up to this, you know. So they need to be developing people. You need to be offering the carrot of developing someone in that role, helping them have meaningful relationships, giving permission to be flexible. So consciously, you know, allowing flexibility where it's appropriate, where it works for both parties, and fundamentally having a personalized approach rather than one size fits all. So that's asking a lot of a manager, because as I said earlier, those two styles don't always come in the same package. They can be really quite different. So while this is just something that kind of has come through in terms of my thinking. I'm interested to see what your thoughts are. So I'm going to come to the chat and have a look. But also, while I do that, I'm going to give you guys the opportunity to say, where do your people think in terms of this? So let me just go in here. So if you were to mark your organisation, I'll put the poll up in a moment, marks out of 10 in terms of whether you think you're in the right place to be both people and task focused, because I guess this might give you an idea of think, right, where do I need to put my energy to make the difference to my organisation? So I would say that if you are fairly task focused, you would feel confident that your processes are defined, well embedded, and they're delivered with quality. So there's a nice flow of people having quality aligned smart objectives, and probably they're broken down. They are reviewed more than once a year. People give regular feedback and have quality one-to-one. So that is a flow that happens consistently, not just in pockets. People also coach for performance. So there's good quality conversations taking place, and performance issues are not left to linger, and they're nipped in the bud. So you don't get these sort of deadwood where people are either they are underperforming and almost start dragging the organisation backwards. So instead, people are having these conversations and this performance is turned around. Now, that's not easy, right? Having a performance conversation, let alone a remote one, is really, really difficult. So it really does require courageous, focused and committed managers with the right tools. So you need to be given the right processes, the right tools. They need to know how to do it. It also needs leadership commitment from the top, because if your leaders won't cascade goals, if they don't tell you where the company's going, if they don't role model any of these behaviours, then you're struggling. And that means actually you need to carefully steer this in terms of these cycles. Any process, if it's not well embedded in your business, you're going to have to drive it. You're going to have to set goals or timelines and nudge people, chase people, dangle the carrot, crack the stick, whatever it is, to get those things to happen on a regular basis. So that's what I think would be in terms of a task one. But I'm going to put up a poll and have a look and give you two the chance to say what you think in terms of the task. And in a moment, I'll ask the same question. Is that actually it's the same question on both? Oh, okay. Oh, of course. Right. Okay. So I've jumped ahead. So first of all, the first question is, give yourself the opportunity to say, if you had to choose one or the other, where would you say your business sits? Is it more people or is it tasks? I'll give you a chance to look at that while I just go through the chat here. Let's have a look. Yeah. So Carol's saying it's really hard to have emotion-laden conversations virtually. It is, isn't it? That sort of empathy where there's emotion with it. If someone's upset, frustrated, even constructive feedback is harder. I think it's not even just body language, is it? It's also the sort of rapport or that sort of unconscious feeling or empathy to feel. It's quite tricky. Ian agrees with the need for dual focus. Having worked in a hybrid way for years, remote management needs a different mindset, style, and a few different tools or schedules, but it's not new or rocket science. Totally, Ian. And when you say different tools and schedules, anything else that you would suggest that, you know, if you've done this, what would you say that does it? Vicky's saying from your perspectives, people, all of what you're doing is currently people focused. And this is, I suppose, my point actually. So let me just share here. So most of you are saying predominantly you're task or goal focused. So if we were to follow this through to logical conclusion, and like I say, this is just, I suppose it's, you know, it's not proven. This is just what I'm thinking. If we're mainly task focused in this day and age, and we know that there's potentially a retention crisis, we know there's potentially employee engagement crisis, and we know that people have gone, do you know what, they've got quite comfortable working in a different way, then the loyalty and the risk of being purely task focused, I think, is higher. So the chances of people not performing as you'd like them to, or taking advantage of flexibility, or just purely not having the being energized enough to deliver against task is potentially higher if you don't have it balanced with the people focus and the support and the empathy. Now, on the flip side, if you're too people focused right now, and you've been like that because of the you know, the pandemic, etc., people are still remote or they're hybrid, so they still need clarity and they need stretch, and many businesses have got to grow faster than ever because they've lost you know, a couple of years. It's not been, I know some businesses have thrived, but some really haven't. So they just that purely people sort of a fluffy approach, which is probably the wrong term, but you know, just purely people, that's not really going to work either long term, because every business needs to succeed. So we need to have engaged, motivated, involved people who have a sense of belonging, and we also need them to feel productive and to be able to perform. So it is a challenge. So of that, most of you have said that you're task focused, but let's see how good you think you are at that then. So I'm going to put it up in a moment, and I'll give you the opportunity to mark on a 1 to 10. And by the way, this isn't shared, I don't know, it's just indicative to see where you think you are. So a tough question is, to what degree, marks out of 10, think in your heads, and I'll put the poll up, would you say that your organization is really good at that? Yeah, as in 10 being brilliant, 1 being hopeless. And then the blue or the people side here, then marks out of 10, to what degree do your managers have the inclination and skill to absolutely adapt their style to meet the needs of the individual? So still offer that personalized approach, to go out of their way to give people regular recognition, to be really catch them doing things right, that side, to be coaching, developing and nurturing people all the way through, really bringing them on. And by doing that, engendering a real sense of loyalty both to them and the organisation, and building strong teams that are inclusive, feel safe, that people feel that sense of belonging even though they're not in an office every day. So, you know, to what extent do you have in the people organisation that going on? And that's a big ask as well. It's even bigger ask to have a manager who's doing both. So to have that though, and this is a big issue, particularly let's say that 75% of the people on this call had more of a task focus. Well, this actually requires managers who value the people aspect of their role. So they actually see it as being important. And so it's seen as a priority. The issue you've got in task-focused cultures is that any time spent on people management is seen as a waste of time. And that's, you know, you can see that we've got to go after getting the numbers in or whatever that is, but it's quite a short-term mentality. If you haven't got anyone to deliver the numbers, then it becomes a problem. So to get managers who value the people aspect of the role, it requires your organisation to prioritise and recognize the time spent down, and then I'll share the poll so we can see what others think. So we have got, share the results. So overall, everyone's in the middle, aren't they? So everyone's saying that they can, it's almost a normal distribution. I'm seeing that, well, actually, I suppose I would observe that considering that the majority of people on here said their businesses were more task focused, you still feel that there's a way to go in terms of the processes to support that task focus, is what I'm reading. There's only, 12 of you, so roughly 50% have gone, no, 60% have gone 6 or 7. So there's still things that you can improve there. So I guess from your point of view, think, okay, that's a clear way in which you can focus things in terms of that. In terms of the people focus, there's clearly some variety again in terms of that, with some people feeling really that there's a massive gap there in terms of that. Certainly is a way to go. So there's somewhere to go in both of those. Not really surprising, but sometimes it's really good to have those kind of questions asked of ourselves, because then we can really think about what it is that we need to do to add value to our organization, and think about it in that way. Right. I'm just checking you still see my screen, because I've now got my poll up. I can't see my screen on that side, but that's okay. So those are my examples of, if you're in this play, in either of these, it looks like everybody, no one's saying they've got it all sorted. So if you do want to improve in either of those areas, then maybe putting some things in around here, but no, on both of them, you do need leadership commitment. You need to gain leadership commitment from the top and get people to buy into these. I mean, this is not new in actual fact, as Ian said earlier. When I was in my previous company, which is quite a long time ago now, we actually did at the time we did our management charter, and we gave everybody who was a people manager an objective around delivering people management practice. So whatever the performance management cycle was, we got them to do that. That was part of their role, and it was prioritized. It was given priority by setting it as an objective. In order to then make sure people do quality of it, then that is really about leadership. It's about how it's done, and it's about educating and training people. It's a cultural piece as well. And to a certain extent, it's a human piece. I do have a view that in an ideal world, you want to recruit people into line management who have the people gene. So there's a bit of it, if someone really isn't interested in people, they are going to struggle with the people aspect. And at the moment, I would argue that hybrid management, and probably for the foreseeable, having that people focus is really quite hard. You've really got to like people and be bothered by people to be able to get the best out of them at the moment. It's quite hard to fake caring about people. So those are just the things to think about. Just a couple of final tips there. This, you will have seen, some of you have been on this with me before. This is a cycle that I think you can hang people and performance management around. So if you have marked 6 or 7 or whatever in terms of your performance management cycle, then maybe, and you want to improve it, it's all very well saying we don't want to have appraisals. You don't have to have appraisals, right? You could have 4 check-ins, you could have 3 check-ins. All I'd say is you need to define what the process should look like, in my opinion, and give it some definitive touch points that people know what needs to happen in them. So this example is saying that at the start of the year, you might review last year and you need to set clear objectives. Talk about these objectives, we set those objectives, we agree, we give everybody clarity. But objectives should not be for 12 months. No objective really is for 12 months. Objectives should be reviewed on a regular enough basis, and I would say a minimum of quarterly. Most businesses should be able to have a quarterly conversation. Now, if your people are completely remote, you definitely need people to be having one-to-ones, which are about supporting, chatting more frequently than that. You've got to have that human contact going on. And of course, you probably want to have that chit chat as well, the social chit chat through other channels too. So there needs to be that human contact going on between. In this one, I say maybe month 3, talk about development. Good time to talk about development there, because actually gives people something, a purpose for development that's linked to their role or objectives. At the mid-year point, it might be about objectives. You could think about looking at things like feedback, looking at behaviours and values is a good thing at the mid-year point. Actually, I'll mention 360 feedback. Next month, I'm talking about feedback. Increasingly giving people feedback using tools like 360 feedback to bring that in can connect people who are working together remotely in a hybrid world, where they're not getting that sort of natural interactive feedback. You could actually use tools like 360 feedback to do that, or talk about people's competencies. Month 9, help people think about having a career or a future in the organisation, even if it's a hybrid organisation, and that just takes a cycle. So all I'm saying really is, if I'm setting up something in a business, and when we're rolling out our software, for example, I would always encourage that organisation to set key activities and deadlines, because you can't create a process that only happens once a year. Well, I suppose you can, but it's not really a habit, because what that's really doing is that's encouraging us just to talk to people once a year. So setting expectations about frequency of people conversations, so whether we expect everyone to have one-to-one a month or whatever that might be, setting expectations about your performance management process or cycle, and making sure it's clearly communicated. And from an HR point of view, you chase it, you nudge it, you reinforce it, you don't just let it roll. Then that can make a big difference. Oh, brilliant, Carol. I'm really pleased you borrowed. Anyone's welcome to borrow this graphic. I'm really pleased, because I think it's a common sense, giving people clarity about what's expected at any point in the cycle. So final side of the webinar, other than telling you what's coming up and things, is what can we do? So if you want to make a difference in your organisation right now, I think it's not just an iteration of where we are, it's about thinking, what do we need to do to get this combined task and people focus? We don't want to just drift, we've got to be conscious about it. You need to gain commitment from the top, because at the top you'll have people who are either task or people focused, often task, and you need to get them to buy into anything that's joined. You need to define your own clock face image like the previous one, and relentlessly embed it, and make sure it's a people and performance management process. So it's talking about the quality of what's done. It involves development and career and coaching, as much as it involves hard, finite task that's deliverable. Invest in training. Managers need support and training. They haven't got the skills, many of them, and make sure that people consider people management activities that are valuable. The time is prioritized, and that goes back to leadership. Many leaders can really spot that. So what's so that's my kind of summary, I suppose, in terms of my thinking on this. Love to know, thank you for chatting throughout. Anyone else, love to know whether you agree or disagree on this. Excuse me. And yeah, there you go, with networking in the chat. I love it. In terms of just closing this down, future webinars that I've got going on, we're talking about feedback next month, and I'll link a little bit why. Then I'm going into stuff about psychological safety, which feels like it's quite a hot topic. Psychological safety, including belonging. I'm doing that on Wednesday. Those of you who know, I do the HR Uprising podcast. I try to do themes around these as well, and there's a back catalogue of podcasts on this. I've got 3 training programs coming up. Hybrid Manager, which is these are open training programs. Change Superhero is almost full, but if you're trying to do change, culture change, there's probably a couple more spaces available on that one. Starts in a couple of weeks. And Impact and Influence training, which is aimed more at individual contributors. Any of the training courses that we run are also available in-house if you're looking for support there, and they're all run virtually. And then just coming soon, that's the course that I've just mentioned. We are launching in February a new product. It's not totally new, but it's called Actus 360 now. We've always had 360 functionality as part of the system, but we realised that not everybody wants Actus, the performance management system, but lots of people want really quick and easy 360 that's affordable and you can get on and just run with it. So we have now got a product that will be going live in February, which has got ready to go templates. It's just you can plug it in, use it, run your 360s as you wish. So that's something just to be aware of. Let me just put my poll up as I usually do, just a quick poll here to make things easy. If you want to know any more about any of these things individually, then my friend Yaku will follow up and send you more information or provide whichever it is. So that's on that poll there. Just indicate if that's something that's of interest to you. So useful resources, all of these links will come out to you. So that's why I show you these, because when the slides come out, you can use these interactive links and get access to things here. So let me just close down that for now, and I'll go to the chat. Do link in with me if you're not on the HR Uprising LinkedIn group. Please feel to do that. We will definitely send the slides from the presentation. They'll come out from Caitlin later on today. And yeah, any questions, please feel free to chat. I've asked them in the chat. I can see that Carol's going to be busy sending her graphics out. Great, go for it, Carol. Carol and I go back to our Siemens days when we both met in Munich running a training course together. So it's just nice to see people again coming back through. Any questions or comments? Love to hear. Oh, great, Jessica. Do let me know, guys, because this is my fresh thinking. Does it make sense to you, actually, or does anyone disagree with that? I know it is kind of common sense, but then sometimes you kind of go, oh, do you know, it occurred to me, actually just through experience in our business, that you see that you have, at the moment, we've got to make sure everybody has clarity about what it is to be focused, and we know what we need to do to be productive. We have to keep focus on, but also people are exhausted as well, so they need lots of empathy and support. So it's a really tricky juggling act at the moment. And so yeah, that's what made me really think about the fact that more than ever we need to have both styles. Thanks for joining, everyone. I can see there's no questions, so look out for the emails, and do please feel free to join together again. Oh, please, Vicky.